Hello everybody and welcome to the episode 8 of the series where I teach you how to build a redstone computer. Last time I talked to you about the registers, the second component you learned after the ALU. In this episode you'll not learn one component but two, but they're both very simple. The bus and the input registers. First I'll explain the bus. If you remember from the first episode and if you've seen that, I went to the other computer to explain the bus because this one is a lot messier. I'll do that again. Okay, so what is the bus? The bus is that orange part over there, and here it's these four lines that run to here, and these little modules that I'll explain in a bit, and actually also all these lines that are going off and on it. So, what is the bus? Well, the bus solves a problem. Which problem? The problem that we now have different components that can all do different things, but they can't work together yet. So we need a component to connect all of those other components so they can transfer data with one another. That's where the bus comes in. The bus just connects all the different components, well, not all different components, not the control unit, but a lot of them. Over there, it's actually just the inputs register, which I'll explain in a few minutes, the ALU, the yellow, and the registers. Here it also has an output. In this more complicated computer, it also has an output that is also connected to it. Building the bus is quite easy. You just have a 4-bit line running through the computer. I would recommend putting this quite centrally because again it will need to connect everything, almost everything. Then next step, you construct these different lines. These lines just go on and out off the bus. This is an entire also actually a different. No, this is the input registers from this computer. So in this example, you can see the repeater is facing that way. So that means it's inputting data on the bus. What I would recommend is putting the repeater always as close as possible to the line. Here I actually didn't do that because what you can do is over here is putting a repeater and a block over it, so this repeater will power that block, powering that line. What will happen if one of the line goes on? Well, it will just go through the entire line, and for example, so it will, if this goes on, can I demonstrate it? Yeah, I can. So if this line goes on, this entire line goes on. So for example, over here, this is an input line because the repeater is faced that way. So you can have one output. Oh no, this is one input. But you can have two inputs or outputs running from the same block. Actually, that's not a problem. So this here the line goes on and it powers these lines that go into the different components. So in that way, with just powering this line for example from this component, if you activate the control lines to do so, you can store bits or you can load them into this component, that's ALU, the registers, and also in this component, so you can connect it to everything. There might be still a thing you'll be wondering, and that's, what are these things for? Well, there is still a problem. As you see, this line is larger than 15 redstone dust. And if you know a thing or two about redstone, you know that the limit of power is 15 redstone dust. So after 15 redstone dust. I'll demonstrate it for people that don't know. The redstone just fades out. So a long line. And if I power it, the signal goes weaker and weaker and weaker. Oh. And here it goes out. This is the 16-bit, the 16 redstone dust. But normally you solve that using repeaters. If you place a repeater down, the strength of the redstone goes back from whatever it is to 15, the max. But you can't use that here because a repeater is one way. Meaning, if you take a repeater and a little bit of redstone, this way it would work perfectly. It just goes on back to 15. Wait, I'll kind of demonstrate it better. Here the power is 13 on the right bottom side, and here it's again power 15. But reverse that won't work because a repeater is one way. A little bit of redstone lesson. Now how to use that? We need to make use of a two-way repeater. And this is the best system that I found online. I didn't develop it myself, but it's not one way. I wanted it to be one way, but I really couldn't find something that was reliable and was one way and still worked in this version. So I went for this. How does this work? I'll quickly build it and I'll come back then. First, why can't we use just two repeaters, one on top and one in the bottom? I'll quickly explain that as well. The problem is, in this setup, so there is a redstone line, goes up, powers this repeater, goes back down. The other way around, it powers this block, powers this repeater, that powers this block, and the redstone line again. The problem is, if this repeater is powered and it powers this block, it will power this redstone, which will power this block, which will power this repeater, which will power this block, and you will never get it off again. So that's the problem. It's one use. But this system is really clever. What happens if this line goes on? This sticky piston extends, so first powers this block, then the sticky piston extends with this redstone block, powering this redstone dust. But you might think, well, this redstone dust will just power this block, powering this sticky piston, powering this redstone block, and powering this line, and you have the same problem again. But no. Why? Because the redstone block diverts the redstone signal, making sure it doesn't power the block. Really clever system. Of course, the downside is as two-way, it's too wide, but I'm willing to make that offering. So now, that of course doesn't make a difference. To make sure the one line doesn't power the other, I put one a little bit up, so it just goes. This one is a little bit higher, a bit just normal, a little bit higher, a little bit low, and normal. The lines always need to go a bit to the right because this here is the input on this line of blocks, here is the input on this line, and sometimes you need to put some smooth stone down to make sure the signals don't interfere with one another again. Otherwise, this signal will power this signal, but with this block, that won't happen. There is still one thing about the bus that I didn't explain yet, and it has to do with these things. And also over here, and also over here. So now, this is the input, so you know exactly what this is. We still have a problem with the bus, mainly that how do we get the bus back to zero? Once a number is loaded onto the bus, we have no way of getting it off it. So if you load a new number on it, it will not just override it, it will just OR it together, and that's bad. So how have I solved this? Well, by using these things. If I power a certain line in the control unit, all these lines will extend, so all in one time. You can't extend them separately. Won't have any use whatsoever. But it extends this line, and this line. And what this will do, if you might remember, is set these storage components to 0. And if this is all set to 0, the entire bus will go to 0. And that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple still. So that was the bus. Now even simpler, input registers. Input registers are extremely simple. It's just basically this, the output from the ALU of the registers. So if you want to know how you need to build that, go to the end of the ALU episode. You have timestamps in the description below, and it's also in chapters, so you can see where it is. Now this one is completely the same, but with the only difference that the input, because of course the input needs to come from somewhere, just comes from this. These lines here are the input. Don't worry about these things on top, that's a little bit different. That's just a control line over here to power it when it needs to put the number that is loaded over here onto the bus, like I also explained in the episode about the ALU and the registers as well, I think. So I didn't explain this system yet, but what it basically does is you can program it to, on a certain moment, load that value onto this line, and then of course do this line on, so it loads it onto the bus. And that's pretty much it, actually. Really simple. A little bit annoying that you have two spaces, so putting these all with one space difference is a bit annoying, but that's it. Don't forget these things. So quick recap. First, you have the bus. The bus is used to connect all the different components, see it as a kind of glue. You have all these different input and output lines with repeaters trying to put them as close as possible to the line itself. Then you have these two-way repeaters that makes use of the redstone block redirecting the redstone line. Then you have these lines that you can all set it to 0 again. And for the input registers, it's just plain old storers like at the end of the ALU of the registers, with the input coming from the control units. That's called absolute value, by the way, just a quick side note. But anyway, those are two very easy components. Next time we'll tackle something a little bit more complicated, the control unit, but then we're almost there. So I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you learned something from it. If you did, please consider subscribing and liking. It would really make my day. Have a great day, and thanks for watching. Bye!